Hey everyone, it's been a while since we posted a DF Direct, but I really wanted to tackle this one. You see, a recent report from Bloomberg has attracted a lot of headlines. The suggestion there is that Sony is struggling to control construction costs for the PlayStation 5, and that the $399 pricing sweet spot enjoyed by PS4 and PS4 Pro may be out of reach for the next-gen system. Bloomberg says that the current cost for building the machine is $450, suggesting that a retail price of at least $470 is likely. But I guess I've got a few questions I'd like to address. First of all, how accurate is this analysis? Will the next-gen consoles really be more expensive at launch than their current generation equivalents? Now, pricing of console hardware has been a topic I've discussed a lot in the past on Digital Foundry, because the fact is that the economics surrounding consumer electronics have been proving increasingly challenging for console manufacturers in recent years, while the pace of technological innovation has also been, I guess you could say, slowing down significantly. Now look, before we go on, I genuinely believe that next generation console hardware from both Sony and Microsoft is going to be superb, but inevitably, delivering a generational leap is going to come at a cost. Yeah, so let's look at the core components here. Solid state storage, it's a game changer. And we're also going to have desktop class high performance CPUs this time around. And while we can't hope to see the 8 times increase in capacity we saw last gen, 16 gigs of GDDR6 memory looks likely, augmented by virtual memory that sits on the SSD. In terms of graphics power, the arrival of the enhanced consoles, PS4 Pro and Xbox One X, it's kind of muddied the waters somewhat in terms of defining what a generational leap actually is, but this shouldn't undermine Sony and Microsoft's next-gen achievements in this area. So let's put it this way, in 2013, PlayStation 4 was the most powerful console on the market with 1.84 teraflops of GPU compute power. If the December 2019 AMD testing leak proves accurate, PS5's 9.2 teraflops amounts to a 5 times increase in performance, even before we factor in the Navi architecture's inherent improvements. Proper generational leap then, but with Pro and X on the scene, it's from there that users now expect this huge leap in performance. And I guess that's not helped by the fact that the standard 1080p display resolution from 2013 has now increased fourfold to 2160p, 4K in 2020. So the cost pressures on next gen are coming in from all directions. First of all, the main processor, the system on chip. It's fabricated at 7 nanometers, and while the crucial cost per transistor is much lower, cost in terms of actual silicon area seems to be a lot higher based on this information from fabrication giant TSMC, which suggests that a processor with the same silicon area costs 66% more than the 16 nanometer FinFET process used by PlayStation 4 Pro and Xbox One X. Now we can only guess at the size of the PS5's chip, but Microsoft is showing an Xbox Series X processor that looks bigger than anything else it's ever made before, significantly so if the measurements of myself and others are accurate. This means we're going to be looking inevitably at a significant increase in core cost right there just on one component. The Bloomberg report points to memory and storage costs being higher than expected too. Nothing official has been revealed as of yet, but as I said, I'd expect both Series X and PS5 to ship with 16 gigs of GDDR6, and this is higher than any consumer-level PC graphics card on the market. Unless you want to include the $700 Radeon 7. But yeah, that's out of production now. But yeah, even before any apparent shortages in components that are hinted at in the Bloomberg article, memory costs would already have been pretty high up on the bill of materials. In terms of the availability of NAND memory for the solid-state storage solutions, I'd also expect to see both next-gen machines ship with 1 terabyte. Now luckily SSD prices have been falling, and to be honest I would have expected both platform holders to have secured supply way ahead of production, compared to an old mechanical hard drive though, of the kind we've seen in current generation and the last. Solid state storage, it's still a considerable investment. Bloomberg also talks about an unusually expensive cooling solution and rather puzzlingly comes up with a $1 cost for a standard cooler and a cost of just a few bucks for PS5's equivalent. Now, I'd expect it to be a whole lot more than that, something that was certainly the case with Xbox One X, which featured an innovative vapor chamber heatsink. However, the point that cooling will be a pricier item for next-gen build costs certainly stands. If the AMD test leak we talked about at the end of last year turns out to be true, PS5 has a GPU that remarkably hits 2.0 GHz, a sustained clock speed that's extremely difficult to achieve on today's PC Navi parts built on the same process. Now, it's easy to believe that both Microsoft and Sony will want to get the highest performance possible out of their 7nm silicon that's been so expensive to produce, and running it faster, obviously, it's the way forward. But yes, achieving that will not be cheap, and I can't see it costing only a few dollars. So yeah, more pressure on the pricing there. So to achieve a next-gen leap in performance, something we all want, well, we should be prepared for a higher cost. Stack that up against what Microsoft delivered with Xbox One X back in 2017. That had a 360 square millimeter slice of silicon, 12 gigs of GDDR5 and a mechanical hard drive. Now back then, Phil Spencer revealed that Microsoft made no money from the ticket price of the machine, with a loss on hardware implied and recouped from elsewhere within the Xbox ecosystem. With that in mind, the concept of either Series X or PS5 hitting that $400 sweet spot seems unlikely. Technology and pricing has shifted from 2017, but a look at the PC GPU market and costs there suggests that it hasn't moved on that much. An AMD RX 5600 XT with 6 gigs of G6 and a 251 square millimeter die, it's a $280 part, while a 5700 based on a higher grade version of the same processor with more memory, it's well north of $300. Now, manufacturing scaling on a console is much higher, costs will therefore be lower, but regardless, this is still a sobering baseline to work from. So are we doomed to super expensive next-gen consoles? While the console pricing sweet spot, $400, may seem unattainable, my contention is that even if the PS5 has a $450 build cost as Bloomberg claims, $400 console still very much doable if Sony is so inclined, and the reason why is very straightforward. Supplementary revenues within the PlayStation ecosystem but outside of the build cost and the retail cost, well, they're much higher than they were back in 2013. Bloomberg's contention that retail price will be a minimum of $470 is based on price differentials calculated from 2013, but these days the platform holder's income is a ton more diverse. Sales from digital stores can be anything up to 60% of a game's overall sell-through, something that was unheard of last gen. With retail stores frozen out, the platform holders should be making more money from each game sold, and at a console's launch, attach ratio of software to hardware will be relatively high, and that's more money in the bank for Sony and Microsoft. Secondly, back in 2013, Sony was still building PlayStation Plus, and it wasn't as essential to the console experience as it is today. In pricing a launch machine likely to be bought by committed gamers, Sony can rely upon yearly subscription income to offset some of the loss. Put simply, while build costs may be significant, perhaps even higher than the $450 that Bloomberg's talking about, I'd say there's a fair amount of latitude available to the platform holders in setting a retail price, arguably more so than they had back at 2013. However, despite this, there is some pretty compelling evidence that prices are going to rise, specifically because of the existence of Microsoft's LOCKHART machine, a cheaper, less powerful Scarlett unit that's been in development alongside the publicly revealed Series X. Phil Spencer hinted at the development of more than one Xbox back at E3 2018, and it seems like LOCKHART's design target is based on the concept of trading game rendering resolution for a lower cost. Nothing official has been revealed, and Microsoft isn't talking about anything other than Series X, but it's not difficult to figure out how LOCKHART's going to be positioned. By targeting a lower rendering resolution, the machine requires a much less capable GPU, saving precious die space, while we are likely to see a drop in memory too. Leaks have suggested 12 gigs of GDDR6 instead of 16. Whether Microsoft will also choose to cut back on the SSD to save further on its build cost. That remains to be seen, but well, I would hope not. Now, funnily enough, I've been modelling 4 teraflop Navi performance using PC parts, using console level workloads in the last week. And while there's going to be a lot of skepticism surrounding this idea of a cheaper, less capable Scarlett machine, I think it could work and work surprisingly well, especially if games target 4K or dynamic 4K on a 9.2 teraflop PlayStation 5. Scalability across resolutions looks promising in my tests, so look out for my In Theory piece on that further on down the road. But I think the key point is this: if there were no concerns at all about next-gen build costs or retail prices for consumers, well, Lockhart would never have made its way so far into Project Scarlett's development cycles. It simply wouldn't exist. As for PlayStation 5 and Series X pricing, well, I think it's going to be challenging. But I honestly think that at this point, it's not so much issues with DRAM or NAND supply that are going to define the price point to the extent that Bloomberg is suggesting, because, well, console manufacturers plan out this stuff and mitigate costs across an entire generation and in context of their whole ecosystem. Not only that, but both Sony and Microsoft will be looking forward to the next generation with far more confidence than they had back in 2013. Do you remember? Back then everyone was predicting the death of the console and indeed the PC in favour of the smartphone and the tablet. 7 years on, console market is still ridiculously healthy, PC is bigger than ever, and the platform holders don't have to design their new machines so conservatively or set price points so conservatively. Ultimately, I think the biggest takeaway from the Bloomberg article is the suggestion that pricing may not be set until Sony has a better idea of what Microsoft's plans are. Of course, it's equally likely that Microsoft itself may well be operating with the same strategy, waiting to see what Sony does, meaning that it's not supply or cost issues that are the real issue here, rather that we're seeing an elaborate game of corporate chicken playing out in real time before our eyes. Ultimately then, competition should ensure that we'll get a good deal, and certainly everything I know about PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X is telling me that the wait, and almost certainly the price, will be worth it. But that's where I'm leaving things for now. As usual, like, subscribe and share if you enjoyed the content and want to spread the word. And yes, you know what's coming, ringing the bell, or rather clicking on the appropriately shaped icon. Well, that will inform you the moment new content arrives on the Digital Foundry channel. The DF Patreon. Get pristine quality downloads of everything we do and everything we've done since the tail end of 2016, and feel all warm and fuzzy at the concept of directly supporting myself, John, Tom and Alex in doing the work we love on our own terms. But that's all from me for now. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of this one, and just generally, thanks for watching and supporting Digital Foundry.